Hey, so my name is Karl Murphy, the president and co-founder of Spiffy. And today we are interviewing Addison Lessing, the manager of our fleet account management team. And this is the beginning of our Inside Voices Career Paths at Spiffy podcast series, where we speak with high performing career members of our Spiffy team. And so we're looking forward to hearing about, what attracted them to Spiffy and what makes a great employee and who are the types of folks that really thrive here. It's a project that's near and dear to my heart in that, I really have two big goals, two big whys I come to work. One is building a great company and the financial success that comes along with that. And the other is creating tremendous opportunities for folks along the way. And I think, we built a pretty nice company, and the thing that I'm most proud of is when I see guys who started washing cars 5 or 10 years ago, running cities, becoming district managers, regional managers, taking over, moving around the team. And Addison has a unique and varied career path here. So we're excited to talk to him. Addison, welcome to Inside Voices.
Hey, appreciate you having me, Carl.
Hey, so Addison, tell the listeners a little bit about like where you grew up, where you came from, and how you found your way to Spiffy on that first day.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I'm a North Carolina native. Go Tar Heels, right? I've lived in every area worth living in North Carolina, from Asheville to Sunset Beach and everything in between. Grew up in a family business myself. Ended up, mostly staying around the Triangle area. Always seem to come back to the Triangle, actually. So that seems to be the trend. Is that no matter where I've ended up, I came back to the Triangle. But finding Spiffy was certainly interesting, right? I came back to the Triangle and was just in need of a job. I knew I wanted something with sort of that family business atmosphere, something I'm very comfortable with. But I wanted to be on, with the team that would be on the cusp of something big. I knew I wanted to be in the automotive industry. I'm a huge car guy. And I saw this little Craigslist ad. Now that's going to date me and age me a little bit there, but I saw this little Craigslist ad for a car wash and detail technician for this company I'd never heard of called Spiffy. I started digging in and I saw this kind of idea that we were playing around with back then, which was this, merging the automotive service industry into the on-demand industry. And this kind of piqued my interest. And I figured, car wash detail technician, get my foot in the door, see what these guys are really about.
Yeah, and you were pretty young, right? You're like 18, 19. I mean,
Absolutely. Yeah, I was 18. In fact, it was like 3 months after my 18th birthday that I
yeah,
I
like
started.
like you just like graduated high school, right? And then
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
yeah, so this is back in 2014, right?
Correct. Yep. This is late 2014.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll take up the story there, and then you can riff off of that. So Addison, yeah. So we needed technicians. I think we had maybe 5 or 7 trucks at that point. This was in the days of the white trucks. So we used to have white vans with blue penguins on them. Now we have blue vans with white penguins, which is a big brand shift for us. It was a huge move for us at the time. It just cost money and it was a pain in the neck. But then, okay, so we had like these 7 white vans, and we operated out of this dump in in Morrisville. It's like half the warehouse had a dirt floor. The parking lot was gravel and flooded, which is a bummer when it rains and then you're supposed to be a detail company. Your trucks are dirty at 7:30 in the morning. And then we had a landlord who had some multiple sets of personality and disorder issues, and he would regularly walk in the building and just start yelling at people. No one in charge. And it would always sort of be like the newest employee would meet the landlord because we had parked in the wrong unmarked space or something. And so in any case, Addison gets hired to be a detail tech, and he's got going through training, and like the phone rings and he picks up the phone, is like, okay, yes, this is Spiffy. We can take your order. Give me a second. Picks up a pen, starts writing down information. Like, look, I'll have somebody call you back. The person who scheduled these things just stepped out of the office. Hey, thanks so much. Let me confirm your phone number. Hey, thanks for choosing Spiffy. Hangs up. I'm like, dude, that was awesome. like, and there were some other folks in the company at the time, and I'm like, hey, that dude may be a great technician, but we need to put him on the phone because the phone thing is it's actually a harder skill to be really good at. And it was interesting early on, we had technology and we wanted customers to schedule services either in the app or online, but we have always answered the phone. And we just like, look, customers want to talk to you. There's some subset of the population that wants to pick up the phone and call you. It was bigger back in 2014, like, you know my mom's, like, in her 80s. In 2014, she didn't use an app or the web for anything. Like, she looked at CNN on the website. She would she wouldn't put her credit card into a, a secure payment portal from, she wouldn't pay taxes online with the government, which is about the most secure thing you can do, right? And then today she runs her whole financial future is on her phone. I'm like, "Hey, mom, hey, we need to move some money between the checking and savings." She's like, "Okay." She's doing that. And that's like, from a 75 to 85. But back then, again, people of a certain age just wanted to pick up the phone. And
No,
and
and
we
it
al and we also felt like we were new, so we wanted to be able to answer questions from people, right? And so it's one of these things it's one of the subtle lessons I've learned from my partner, Scott Wingo, is you need to really open up all channels for inbound demand because you just don't know where it's gonna come from. And we've done some, I would say, very analog and painful things over the years just because and Addison was at the center of the lubrication of that painful, inbound traffic, and we've done that just because the customer's important, and as an entrepreneur, you wanna see where the demand's coming from. So in any
yeah.
case, so Addison had, like, a 2-week career as a technician, and then he went to our customer service team and answered the phone, which he in hindsight, he may have preferred to just be a technician, but I think the customer service side of it was more challenging. So pick up there and tell me about what happened in your career at Spiffy after that.
Yeah, yeah. So that's I mean, look, that's a great segue. It was pretty much that exact story, right? Where we just sort of started answering phones and there was a team member I worked with at the time. Her name was Lily. And she was like, You're gonna like crush this. So, go tell your boss right now that like you want to be doing this full time. And I was like, answering phones, call center thing. I don't know. I don't know. And you're right. Like there was probably a part of me that's like, man, I want to be out working on cars, and stuff like that. But no, I wouldn't ask because, there was the added benefit of, more air conditioning and climate control than being out in the field. And that's where it sort of took off. I worked, at the time, the position was called scheduling coordinator. In fact, I actually have my training folder about 6 feet away from me from back then. I love to reference that at the then and now after, 10 years. It's definitely, it's definitely a blast from the past, but you're absolutely right. One of the things that was interesting you just mentioned was talking about this early days versus now, this kind of pivot to the acceptance of digital technology, right? Those early days, we'd get so many calls that were exactly that. I don't use apps. I don't give companies emails. I don't, do online payments or anything. And so it was a really interesting transition. But as we kept growing and scaling, I had a number of different opportunities. Namely, I worked in inside sales for a little bit, right alongside Carl actually, and acted as Carl's assistant and working in inside sales, doing a lot of cold calling. I think Carl and I agreed that cold calling wasn't my strong suit. I love talking to people, absolutely love it, but, like, if they already want our services, not, like, convincing them they want our services. But, after that, that was really the big pivot in my Spiffy career was once I started to dip my toes into different aspects of Spiffy, trying things I hadn't tried before. There was a period of time, we had a brief pilot program Spiffy was looking through. At the time, we called it Spiffy Sell. It was something I worked with, Scott on for some time where we'd go out and help customers, sell their vehicles. And then,
Right.
as it kept growing, we ended up not going down that route, but we found a really interesting, subset of the business. At the time, it was a subset, which was fleet business, right? And like this sort of side of things where we're working with enterprise and a couple of our rental car partners started to explode. And it just started to overwhelm our little customer service team, and we couldn't balance the two. And my former, boss, my former manager, Aaron Boljan, came to me and was like, "Hey, like, I wanna start this team where, like, all they do is focus on our B2B lines of business. All they do is look at business to business, and I think you'd be really good at this. Like, are you on board with it?" And the answer was yes. And that was about 5 years ago, and we've continued to evolve this team and build on it. Aaron's moved on to another role within the organization, which opened the opportunity for me to lead the team myself.
Yeah, it's funny. Addison is incredibly polite and politically correct in discussing how I had counseled early employees. And often, I've gotten a lot better. I think there's we joke, the evolution of Carl's communication is sort of like software revs. It's like Carl 1.0, Carl 2.0. There's like my kids, my significant others, and then my work people, my work, who sort of like a span of 20 years. And I think we're somewhere between Carl 8 and Carl 10.0. But back in the day, we don't operate this way today, but I think it's historically interesting. I'd hear Addison, talking, and I'd come over and I'd slam my hand on his desk literally to get his attention because he had like a headset on. I'm like, dude, that was really good, except that. He's like, and Addison's like, his heart skipped a beat. Poor Lily. Lily was spectacular. She ended up leaving because her family sort of moved sort of outside commute distance, and it became challenging for her. She had been with us for a couple of years. She was,
Okay.
again, early employee who customers just loved. But Addison, I tell you, and so we're talking about what's it take to be successful at Spiffy. I'll tell you, one of the things that made Addison successful is, you know, he bought into the vision of the company and he loved cars, right? So that was sort of like, I like coming to work every day. Like I like being around cars, and Addison empathizes with customers who are sort of crazy about their cars. I used to own 2 car washes with my partner Scott, and I would find consumers were more concerned about their Land Rover than their kids. Literally, like, somebody would be yelling at me because, there was some crumbs in a cup holder, and then they're like 5-year-old kids are playing in like a relatively high traffic area. I'm like, "Dude, I'll get the crumbs. Why don't you go get your kid? Because they're not covered by workers' comp, and your wife wants them back in one piece." I quite literally, like, we have, right, I mean, like, we have
Oh, yeah.
there's like a double-digit percentage of our customers that have a uh, maniacal sort of obsession with their vehicles, and we serve them, right? That's important to us. And so, and Addison has loved those cars. And then, there's this intensity. So we're gonna do 70 some $1 million this year. It's 2024. When Addison joined, I don't think we were doing 200 grand, 300 grand. I mean, we do more in a day than we did in a year when Addison showed up today.
No, and I'm tempted, Carl, to go open that training folder because I have all of our goals written down, and I believe at the
Yeah.
time we were targeting something like 80,000 a month or something to that effect, or that was like a goal or vision we had in early 2015. So we were nowhere near that at that point. That was the
Right. It's
goal
like,
we had set.
right. Yeah. So how do we, well, yeah, it was how do we get to $1 million a year, which is
Yep.
80,000.
Yep.
Yeah, interesting. And then, Addison, because he's had that vision, it's an intense place to work. Like, we have very high standards. I talk about elite behavior. I play these Nick Saban videos all the time to prove that I'm not the only crazy person in the world. And Addison always sort of signed up for that. He goes, I don't want to be average, right? I want to be above average. I want to be great. And and when the crazies like me show up, Addison's been like, okay, he's fine. And Addison has taken the mission of being um, the psychological counselor for most of the rest of the company. Like, look, Carl's actually okay. Don't worry about it. Just, show up on time, whatever it might be. So I appreciate that. Hey, and the other thing I think that's important to call out is, Addison's been here 10 years. How many different positions have you had? 4 or 5? I mean,
Oh
I'm not
gosh.
talking about just promotions, but I mean, you started you're a technician. You went to
Yeah.
customer service, right? Then you went to fleet account management. Then you're on sales team, right? That's 4.
Yeah, I did a brief stint back in SEC. That was as like an assistant supervisory type position, and then director of fleet account management now. So that, I mean, if you want to call it 6 total, I think over
Yeah.
the 10 years is at least 6 different positions, not including all the little side projects I've worked on.
Yeah. And then on top of that, Addison again grew up in North Carolina, joined us in Morrisville was where the office was, but basically Raleigh area. And now you live in Tampa, right? Like, you moved to
I do.
Tampa with your family. And yeah, Addison's married, has a house, has cars. I often joke with Addison that he makes too much money to support his car habit. There's more broken, cool Mercedes floating through his life than probably should any one person's. But that's good to Addison going on weekends.
Absolutely. Hey, look, I was doing that when I was making $10 an hour for
I
this.
know, I
Things
know. Well,
change.
look, that's a message to people. People start here making $10 an hour, and then they build like a really nice, upper middle class lifestyle, own a house, you know, what do you get? 3 weeks vacation? I mean, you have like you have more friggin' vacation. Yeah, you have
Yep.
4 weeks vacation. You have more vacation than you can take, right? And so, as you think about coming to Spiffy as a career, you know, if you can get past, this is my sort of uh, editorializing. If you can make it 90 days, you can make it 9 years,
Absolutely.
and like we pay well. It's hard work. It's particularly hard in some places if you don't like a couple of things. So you talk to employees, you talk to technicians every day, and you have for basically the last 10 years.
Mhm.
What do you see that makes technicians successful? Like what are the things that make them successful? And then riff on like, hey, these are why guys like opt out and leave.
Yeah, absolutely. So, being successful at Spiffy, I genuinely believe it comes down to one very simple concept or one simple mantra, and it's like follow the process or be open to the process. The hardest thing I think at Spiffy is we have to remind everyone we're here to disrupt the automotive industry, not fall into the same like cliches of the automotive industry. So some of our guys come in and gals come in with this mindset of what they've always known or their experience in the automotive world, and they see Spiffy and it's like this different beast, this different organization. And so sometimes we come across those scenarios where it's like, oh, I know how to do it better. And look, we're open to that feedback. I'm always here to hear, hey, if you've got a better way to do something, like call us, let us know. We'll look at it, make sure that, that we can fit it in. But if it's, in most cases, the processes we put together are because of that feedback or because of the, 10 plus years that we've had technicians tell us what works and doesn't. And now we have what I believe to be a very successful process for how we operate out in the field. You deviate from that process, you put yourself at safety risks, you disappoint customers, you get
Yeah.
into this cycle of performance issues. And I think that's really the number one, cause for or the number one way to be successful at Spiffy is like, hey, be open to the process. We'll take your feedback. I promise you that. I will answer that phone. But like do me a favor and follow the process as it is today so that we can make sure the work was done right.
Yeah. I think that's the biggest challenge for people with experience. If
Yes.
you're a 30-year-old mechanic coming to Spiffy, you really have to have an open mind and some patience around you need to change the way you do a few things. I mean, just for example, we suck oil, right? We use a suction system to take oil out of engines. About a third of the services we do today are oil changes. About a third. It depends on the client, but so 1 out of 3, we're sucking oil out of a vehicle, and we do that for a bunch of reasons. It's faster, it's safer, we have more control over it, all those sorts of things. But like some old school guys, they just want to drop a drain plug, right? The other thing I find it's sort of interesting, if you're a technician out there, we use airbag jacks, right? And so they hook up to an air compressor. Every truck has an air compressor on it, and it's like one squeeze, and you can lift F-250. Like the things will lift most, over the road sort of consumer vehicles, right? If it's got
Yep.
4 wheels and it's at a rental car company, it's in your driveway, we can lift those up. It can lift 15 passenger vans, all these sorts of things. But it's one squeeze, right? And then we put jack stands underneath it, and we lower it down, we change the oil, or we change the tires, rotate the tires, whatever it might be. And then you jack it up and lower it again. And so it's like 2 squeezes up and down. And I continually find people, and we have jack stands, and jack stands are, I'm sorry, we have hand jacks, and the floor jacks or the hand jacks are backup, right? In some cases, there's really big vehicles we need to use, and there's like some specialty things we have to use them for. So we have them everywhere. They're like on even most of the trucks. And I see guys out there just like pumping, like, dude, it's 50 pumps to get the damn thing up. And some locations we expect technicians to do 20 oil changes a shift, right? 8 hours, 9 hours. And I'm like, dude, that's a lot of on, even if you're looking for the workout, like you're just gonna be tired. You're gonna be tired by 3 o'clock. And I have to really, we spend a lot of time talking to people about why we do things the way we do them because they're different than Valvoline or the Mercedes dealership or wherever you may have come from before you came to Spiffy. What else do you what are some reasons, like, when employees, like, there's invariably this case where, like, you know, expletive, expletive, "I'm done," right?
Yep.
And sometimes you're the first person to hear that, right? Because something in the
More
field just
often than not.
yeah, like that, like, because the customer care team is talking to the technicians more than their manager might be just because it's the way the services work. So, what are some of the reasons why employees sort of Hunt.
Yeah, so I mean, I think the biggest challenge is going to be the most obvious, right? We are 365 days a year, rain or shine. It's not going to be sunny and 70 every day, as much as I'd love for it to be. There's severe thunderstorms rolling through Tampa outside my window right this very second, and we're
Mhm.
still running Tampa today. So I think it's sometimes it'll really get to a technician when, hey, you've had a couple really challenging days back to back. It's been either 98 degrees and 100% humidity, or it's been, storming and yet you got wet today because we had to get under some cars. And I think that we see a lot of that frustration. But I'll tell you on the flip side of that. Look, I remember in my technician days, there was a day we did a 96 car wash event. It was me and four other guys that were out there, and it was in a what we call a recurring service location in Raleigh. And it was one of the most exhausting days of my life. It was mid-90s, peak summer, and I never slept better than I did that night, and I almost missed the shift the next day just for I mean, got a great sleep. But I'm gonna tell you, it's first off super rewarding for those. Those were consumer services, so there was, like, tips and stuff included too. I had a very nice paycheck that weekend. But on the flip side of that, like, the guys you're working with, the gals you're working with, like, they're in that with you, you know? And I think it's lean on them. They're the camaraderie we have with our teams, with our technicians is incredibly important. It was something that stood out to me when I was a technician. And I think it's just accepting that, listen, today, and this is, I think, the case with any job, but, today may suck. Today may not be beautiful and sunny. I may get a little wet. I may get sweaty and I'm going to go home tired, but like it was a good day's work. And like you're going to come back tomorrow and tomorrow might be sunny and 75 with no humidity, nice breeze, and like it'll be cake work. And so my advice, because you're absolutely right, we get those calls, every now and then where technicians like, I'm done with this and I'm not doing another service. And we're like, hey man, like, I appreciate it. And I tell my team, not all my team have been out in the field. And I tell them like, hey, send those calls to me. Like, let me talk with them for a second and just like, hey, and apologies, you can hear my cat feeder going off in the background, which is perfectly timed at 12:30, I guess. But I always talk to those guys and I'm like, hey, I get it. I've been there, like, my arms are so tired, I'm sweating, and I'm like, "Is this worth it?" And then, like, I get home and I'm like, "Dude, I killed it today." Like, I I
Yeah.
I washed 40 cars or 30 cars today, and, like, how many people can say that they can produce that or that they did that good of a job or that you look back and you got five-star reviews on every single one of them and somebody tipped you $100 and it's like, you go after, you get out of that mindset, that impulsive mindset where, you're still out in the field and dealing with it, and, like, you look back and you're like, "Holy crap, man, I did a great job today."
Yeah. Yeah, so it's interesting. The job satisfaction, if you like, feedback from humans and you're good at your job, there's a lot of that here.
Yeah.
When I went from being, my start in the industry was I bought a car wash, right? Scott and I bought a car wash. I was the operator. Scott was an investor. And, for the first 3 years, I ran the car wash. Like I was the manager. And, I'd come home on Saturday night we closed at 6 on Saturday, cleaning, maintenance at 7. I roll in at 7:30, 8 o'clock at home. And I just love it was just so much fun, right? Because, we'd handle 150, 200, 300 cars sometimes on a Saturday. And if you're on, like, the customers are just so happy. They're, like, so satisfied, and the thing about a car wash, on the consumer side for sure is, they're coming to get their car washed because they care. And they either care because they love their cars or something important in their life is happening. I used to joke, with the customers, like, you either show up every week or you show up when your mother-in-law shows up. Right, like, because, and I used to do all this email marketing. I'm like, when is your mother-in-law coming? Please come soon. Don't, if she's landing at 1, give me more than an hour to clean your car up, right? But that job satisfaction is hard to get in a lot of places, right?
Yes.
You get in restaurants, like, if food's really good, like, and you're the waiter or waitress, right? Like, you get that feedback, but that's a positive. It's interesting, the weather side of things. So there's, like, the volume of work side of things, which is satisfying. There's the customer side, and then there's the weather. It's interesting what I've observed, like, so we're in over we have, like, 65 P&Ls across, like, so profit centers across, like, 35 cities today, and we've operated in the winter in upstate New York, right? Like, we've literally washed trucks in Buffalo in
Mhm.
January successfully, and interestingly, like, those employees never quit. Like,
Yep.
There, the waters, we have these hot water pressure washers, right? I mean, literally, like, if there was snow, we would not be, operating. But as long as it wasn't like extreme weather, we're running the system. And those guys were great. Now, you know, it gets to be like 28 in Raleigh and like the whole place shuts down, right? And so it's very, and then again, like I showed up, we run in Phoenix, Tucson, Las Vegas. We run sort of like Eastern California and sort of Riverside out there. And it's just, I mean, it's the desert, right? It's hot as the desert, it's hot as the Sahara out there. I mean, the guys in Vegas, like they don't think it's hot until it goes over 105.
Yep.
Right?
N
And one of my best, I tell this, I'm sure you've heard this story. I tell the story all the time. I came in and we had just, the manager had just left. And so I flew in to talk to the employees. I said, look, we're going to hire a new guy. I need you guys to kind of self-organize for a while. And I said, what can I do for you? What do you need? And they're like, ice. I'm like, you need ice. I'm like, I don't understand. He's like, and so this technician goes over his truck and he pulls out this coffin size cooler, right? Like, it's like, I'm throwing a tailgate for every family member I have, sort of cooler, right? Like you can put cases of beer or soda in this thing. And he has literally his lunch. He has like some water in there and it's just filled with ice. I'm like, okay, you need ice. He's like, yeah. He's like, I spend $7 a day on ice. I work 20 days a month. It's $250 a month in ice. I'm like, hmm, okay. Cool. So we went out and we ended up buying an ice machine for him. And the funny thing is we buy an ice machine, they're like, well, the ice machine wasn't good enough. We needed a freezer, but you need to bag the ice because there's like this peak demand thing, right? Everybody comes in at the same time. Where do you store it? So then we had an ice machine and we we're running out of ice. So then we bought an ice, storage, whatever, freezer to storage for it. And it's been like, and it probably cost us, I don't know, $500, $800 to make that investment for the employees. And it's been like the best thing we've ever done, and particularly uh, in Las Vegas. But my observation is the weather stuff is it's when local weather becomes extreme.
Yep.
Like again, like 20-degree weather in Buffalo is sort of like spring to people in Buffalo, right? Like they don't really care if it's like
Yep.
until it's like -5. Like you have to go below 0 Fahrenheit for someone in Buffalo to like put a jacket on,
Yeah.
right?
I was
Hey,
just there for the eclipse and got ridiculed for wearing a jacket in 50-degree weather, so, can confirm that is in fact the case.
yeah, yeah. So again, I think if you're thinking about it, well, and then the other thing is like people show up. We ask them like, "Do you play any sports? Did you play sports?" Like, "Yeah, I play basketball all the time." And I'm like, "Look, playing a game of pickup with your buddies on Saturday is not the same as working at Spiffy all day on Saturday, right? Like, just you're gonna. I mean, if you played 2 hours, that's a lot of basketball, right? But we're working 8-hour days. Sometimes those shifts go a little bit longer, and so there's a physicality and an external dealing with the environment sort of thing that's challenging. I do find I was out with two managers last week, and they're both sort of outdoorsy guys. Like they fish and they hunt and they have animals, chickens and pigs and stuff at home, and they're in sort of one of our more rural areas. And they sort of poo-poo the weather issue. I'm like, well, yeah, you're just like sort of an outdoor guy. I mean, if you're a 25-year-old kid and you're coming in off of a job, I used to joke at the car wash about, did you come from Dick's Sporting Goods where you're folding T-shirts, right? Because Dick's paid the lowest amount of money, but the kids that we competed with, they would go there because they could watch ESPN, right? So they'd come in and oh, I'm just folding T-shirts and watching ESPN all day, and I only make minimum wage, but like that's easier than you pay more, Carl, but like it's work with a capital W. Interesting. So tell me about some other what like interesting stories would people like to hear about from the outside? If you're a technician coming in, like give a technician tell a story that like this is like spiffy. Like this is like unique to spiffy.
Yeah. No, and, this is great because one of the stories I think back to, keeping in mind the context, I started as a technician and sort of worked my way into where I am now, and I'm thrilled and privileged to now have a director level position at Spiffy. But I think the really interesting story that I wanted to share, that I wanted to bring up was the first week that Aaron Bolshin and I had created this department. The very first week, Carl looks at me and says, "You got to go to DC." And it's like, "Okay, great. What am I doing in DC?" "You're launching, Enterprise, one of our rental car partners. There's a first location in this market." It was brand new to us at the time. "First location in this market we're launching." Context again, this is 5 years ago. I started at 18. I was like 23. I'd never really traveled for work. I had just got out of like the inside sales thing where I was like, I don't know if I want to do that. But the difference was this client was already bought in. My job was to go in, get the site logistics figured out, set these things up with the customers, get the expectations sorted out, engage demand. And the funniest thing was that I stopped by our RDU, our Raleigh CBU, or shop in Raleigh as I'm on my way out, and out come several VPs and GMs and RM carrying boxes of oil. Now, no one had told me that I'm also delivering oil to DC. At the time, I was actually using my spouse's little Lexus hybrid, a tiny little hatchback, and I had that thing weighed down with, God, 40 boxes of oil in the back of the car. And I drove to DC, but the great part of this story was that, I went in extremely nervous for a number of reasons. I think there's a lot of this discussion of imposter syndrome, especially among younger people these days. And I'm like driving to DC, there's nothing that really gets you thinking like a driving 6 hours to like, something you've never done before. And, in my mind, I'm going, dude, I like Spiffy's taking a gamble on me. Do I know what I'm doing? And like, one of the things that I've always, bragged about, and I've always had my confidence in, I can talk to anybody. I can talk to them for a while. So I knew I could do that. The question is, can I get the intended results for Spiffy to deliver what we need to deliver? And, we got there, we got the site logistics worked out. We had bays set up, we're going around. I'm throwing boxes of oil in this place. And the success came from, being able to say that that client is still using us 5 days a week, 5 years later, all starting with this launch. And why that I think is important for technicians to know is that Spiffy has this really unique ability to take risks on some people and take chances on some people that I don't think many organizations would. And it's something that has continually kept me here for 10 years because I can promise you that if you had told 18-year-old car wash technician Addison that you're going to be a director level, individual in management, in leadership 10 years from now at this company that's going to scale beyond what you could possibly imagine, I don't think I'd believe you. And I'd say like, you're smoking something and like, this is the wrong state to be doing that in. And like, this is, where we are now. I always look back on that as that sort of pivotal moment when Spiffy took this gamble on me and like we were able to deliver. And I have always tried to set a standard since, and it's like, hey, like you have to do better than even that, each year. And I think that what a lot of our new team members, our technicians coming in, don't always see is the bigger picture, right? Which is like, hey, you're washing cars today, and that is extremely important, and we need that. But like in 5 years, you could have your own market. You could be working in corporate. We have team members in our corporate headquarters that were also technicians that ended up in HR or customer service or sales or marketing. This isn't a unique story to me. It's just one that has stuck with me for so long is that there are very few organizations that I have interacted with that I think would take the chances on people that Spiffy has and done so successfully.
Yeah, that's awesome. I lose track of that. Thank you for sharing that. I wanna riff on that a little bit, and then I wanna ask you a question about what do you think Spiffy culture is. So warm up your Spiffy culture pitch. I think if you're a technician and you're willing to travel and you're willing to test your limits, Spiffy is a great place to be.
Yeah.
We will offer you opportunities to excel and do things that make you uncomfortable and fly you around the country. Last year in 2023, we built a new line of business servicing logistics fleets. We went from $0 in revenue to a $10 million a year run rate in like 14 months. And we put a lot of technicians. I ran into a guy in Seattle at midnight, in a parking lot. And I'm like, hey, dude, where are you from? And I think I asked him, like, do you like living in Seattle? Because like Seattle, like I love Seattle, like in July and the rest of the year, it's like meh, rainy, cloudy. And this is one of those meh months and it's sort of misty. And I'm like, ugh. I used to be in the army. I got out of the army. One of the reasons I got out was like, I just hated the freaking rain. And like because every time I see him go to the field, like I was either in a desert where there was no rain or I was somewhere else where it just rained constantly. And in any case, he's like, I'm not from Seattle. I live in Houston. I'm like, you live in Houston? He's like, yeah. I said, how'd you end up here? He's like, well, we were short technicians, so they flew me in. I'm like, awesome. I'm glad the team's got that going on. He's like, what do you like? He's like, I sort of like it here. I'm an outdoorsman. I'm thinking about coming up here on vacation with my family. And, he was up there for like a month, right? Living in an Airbnb, an Airbnb slash, fraternity house. And we pay for that, right? He's getting it per diem and his travel and he's working, right? He's working hard. But he got to see a different part of the country. Ultimately, that guy ended up moving to Austin. So he went from Houston to Austin. He'd always wanted to live in Austin. It's a little more opportunity there than Houston, I guess, at least in our world. And then he actually ended up in Colorado and a couple other places. So he really got on the road and traveled with us. So that exists. And so there's the travel side, which is sort of fun if you hadn't like traveled in your life, you hadn't seen different parts of the country. And then there's just the professional development side. I on several Addison said several of those like go fix this missions. And there's a couple of people in the company who are pretty good at it. There's another guy, we need to get him on the podcast, Brandon Oxendine. And Brandon will like, hey Brandon, I need you to go to fill in the blank city and fix these problems. Bullet point, bullet point, bullet point. He's like, okay. He goes, what else? And he knows sort of like, what else do I need to do? How long do you think it's going to take? And he has this big steamer trunk of clothes, and he'll carry like a blazer and then like work clothes that are covered in oil because he's not really sure. Do I need to go talk to a vice president? I need a polo shirt, maybe a jacket on, or do I need to lay underneath the car and change oil because like the technician didn't show up for work? And he's just good about that. Some people, what we found is some people just they don't really enjoy that, right? Hey, I was sent to do A and B and D, E, and F showed up and I got to go pivot and go do that stuff. And so, but it really, if you're young as you were, right, it really helps you develop confidence around your skill set around stuff. And there's really not like things you can't handle, right? Addison, you run a big team now and Addison's like, well, how do I coach those people? I'm like, well, how did you get coached? Like, well, how do you want to be treated? Give them a standard, give them time, train them, coach them through it, be patient, and then every now, again, there's like sticks and carrots in there, but like go do that. And so it really helps you develop your skill set and then just this level of confidence around what you're capable of. And I lose track of that sometimes, but people have been around a long time. We try to do less of that these days. We try to like have someone who's well trained and this is like your mission and they go in and they do those sorts of things. As you get bigger, you can't have, I think back in 2015 or 16, we had like 5 people that were just like, as an entrepreneur, I call them Swiss Army knives, right? Like they can sell, they can operate, they can repair, they can, in the case of Oxendine, like, he can put up sheetrock, he can weld, he can repair cars, he can train people, he can do selling, he's like good to customers. Again, and I think there's this whole, like you mentioned this, can I talk to the customer, right? And it's like, what's important? Okay, what are my left and right limits? What are we going to do that is going to make you unhappy? And it could be something as simple as where do we put our trash cans, right? Like quite literally, like we want the trash cans in the building. Okay, well, we make the trash outside the building. Can we put the trash outside and we'll bring it at night? It's like this little sort of stuff that ultimately makes customers very happy that we're concerned about being nice tenants on their property, but we're trying to be efficient, that sort of thing. So that's a great story. I forgot about that. And the other thing is, from a technician standpoint, Addison said, look, there's like regional managers and vice presidents carrying oil out of the building. Like we didn't, tell Addison to go find 2 privates to go get the oil. Like the VP is like, hey, look, Addison's here. Like everybody grab 2 boxes and get out to the car. And so you see a lot of leadership out in the field, right? And I often freak technicians out because I show up and I spend a lot of time there. My most recent funny story is, I showed up in Portland. They needed to learn how to wash some cars for this fleet. And, I showed up at 7:00 at night, inspected the vehicle. I started ripping the truck apart because it wasn't ready. The area manager's like, what are you doing? I'm like, your truck's not ready to wash cars tonight. Like, I'm not going to go down 15 miles from here and be jacked up. Like, he's looking at me. I'm like, dude, we need to fix the van right now. And then we drove out and, I stayed there till 4 a.m. and he called his boss like at midnight. He's like, Carl's still here. He's like, Karl said he's going to train you how to wash cars. He's like, yeah, are you done washing cars? So he's like, no, I wouldn't expect him to leave until you're done washing cars. Well, he's making me nervous. Well, then you should finish the cars. What's he making you nervous for? He's like, I don't know. He's just here. I'm like, what's he doing? He's like, he's washing cars. He's teaching us how to wash cars. He showed us how to wash a car in 15 minutes. And so, and I'm not the only person, right? I mean, from me down, everybody on the management team will show up and and change oil. I love Jim Wilson, our vice president for the East. He ran Philadelphia as a GM, and he was short staffed. He had some staffing issues, and I remember him interviewing the current GM. From underneath a car, he's changing oil. I was like, "Hey, dude, tell me about your management history. Changing oil, rotating tires, that sort of thing." Because sometimes that needs to happen. So that's good, right? If you're a new employee, like the the management team understands your job and is empathetic to it. If you don't like that, I'd go somewhere else. You're going to have a lot of, uh, I would say, engaged managers around the team.
Yep.
So shortly, like, let's tell me about what Spiffy culture means to you. Like, how do you think about it? How does it manifest itself? And then we can wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you know, first off, like I think that this is a great tie-in to what we were just discussing, which is, first and foremost, I think what always struck me about Spiffy culture is seeing leadership in the field. It is early into, I say early, but this has been maybe 4 or 5 years. There was a chance where we were all told, "Hey, you're going to get Simonized certified." Like and we're all sitting here like, dude, I'm in like fleet account management now. What do you mean I need to go, get Simonized certified? And they're like, well, you're selling these services to our customers. You're answering those questions. The best way you can do that is knowing how to actually do it. And so we sure were. We had an entire operation where it was, me and executives and RMs and GMs and sales. I believe there were
Yeah,
even people from finance and accounting that were
yeah.
out there. And we are
Aaron,
out.
Aaron was out there. I remember that. Yeah.
Absolutely, and we're out
Aaron's like,
detailing cars.
Carl, I need to buy new clothes to come to work.
Yep, and so it was, that was something that always struck me about Spiffy's culture is that there's no one that's above any specific task or work at Spiffy. It's we all understand it, we understand the job that needs to get done, and we'll all pitch in to try to make sure that we are successful in doing so. But the other piece of this too that we if we break our culture down a little bit more, and one of the things that has certainly kept me around for 10 years and will continue to keep me around is, you know, look, we've all heard the corporate cliches of, transparency, and we try to be clear with our employees, but like Spiffy actually does that. It's not just something we say or we talk about. Like everyone is invited to participate in our company wide meetings that you and Scott lead. That you open to questions, be it anonymous or not, and they're not always the easiest questions to answer. And sometimes we can tell someone's a little fired up. But, like, there's truly but sometimes there are questions that have to be asked, and, there we get these answers, and we understand what's happening in the organization, and we may not love every answer we get, but, like, at least we have a clear understanding of what's happening. So, this culture of transparency, and I also think this idea, and I think this is probably the theme of our whole conversation today, is growth and scale alongside the organization. We're not the kind of organization that's like, "Oh, well, you don't have 2 MBAs in this particular field, so, like, we're not gonna even look at you as a potential, individual for this." I think that we look at it and we say, "Hey, like, what's your experience? What's your skills? What's your ambition? And, like, why do you think you're gonna be successful in this?" And if, like, you can answer those questions and do it well, like, you have an opportunity, you have a shot. And I think that culture, between the transparency, everybody getting their hands dirty and like being willing to take a chance on employees who genuinely display ambition or drive to go and scale at the same rate that our organization is scaling, that is what Spiffy's culture, is at its core. It's just, we focus so heavily and we emphasize so heavily the integrity of our team members, and that feeds into our transparency that it allows everyone from a technician to our CFO to have a good understanding of what's happening in the company today, what's happened in the past, and where are we going next. And that's something that always keeps me motivated, and what I'm able to bring back to my team and saying, like, guys, yeah, today wasn't great, like it wasn't ideal, but like here's where we're going next. I need you to stay motivated and get us to this finish line because we are moving quickly in that direction.
Yeah. Thanks. That was awesome. You have the benefit of, a decade here. So you have the ups and downs. I mean, left to right, we're going up and to the right. I mean, there's some dips in there, dips on customer service, dips on employee care. We've gotten better and worse over time. Generally, it's like up and to the right. I think it's important, like, you have a high school degree, right? You don't have a college degree or an MBA. And yet you're a director in the company. You manage a fairly large team. 10 years in, right? Started washing cars at $10 an hour and then just basically showed up, did your best every day and hustled. And so, uh, I think that's a big message to the people coming into the company. And again, we have a lot of general managers who started, running, we have a GM running a $7 million line of business. I found out he has a couple years of community college. Which I didn't know. I had lunch with him the other day. I'm like, I didn't know that. He's like, yeah, I didn't tell you, and whatever. But again, we hold people accountable for performance. We don't hold them accountable for uh, uh, sheepskin validations that didn't happen in our building.
Yep.
And we've had a lot of people with a lot of sheepskins come in and leave because they weren't really just good at like doing the work, right? From my standpoint, I mean, it's culture is about customer first. I think that's the thing that's the most different about Spiffy. It's not about any other priority other than the customers pay our bills. They need to be cared for before anyone else is, me, the technician, et cetera. And we see that we operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We operate on Christmas and New Year's. We got to find people that can do that, and we got to care for them on the way out. So, uh, interesting. Hey, so any questions for me?
No, I mean, Carl, the funny thing for our listeners, and you mentioned it a couple times, but I didn't bring it up then, I've had a really unique opportunity at Spiffy, and it's not just at Spiffy. I've actually worked for Carl outside of Spiffy as well. I did work at those car washes that he was talking about, as did my spouse. So
Yeah.
we have been very enveloped in and that was post Spiffy founding. That was more of a, I wanted to get a second job, make some extra money over the weekends type thing. But, it's been one of those things where I've had a lot of exposure to Carl, to Scott Wingo, to the Spiffy machine, the organization that we are today. And Carl, you said it a while ago, and it's like you're sometimes the uh, therapist or psychologist for our folks in the field, and that's true, but it's also because of that perspective. It's because sometimes I
Yeah.
can see, and I'll tell our listeners, Carl and I have been at each other's throats before. We have absolutely had our share of disagreement. But I think at the end of the day, Carl and I, and I think
Players argue on the sidelines.
correct, correct. And I think that that's the thing is that nothing that we disagree about. First off, we all know it's never a personal thing. It's about, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. We just disagree on how we get there or, about a specific subject. And I think that that's where it comes in the most is that as I'm talking to a lot of our, field leaders and even our leaders within corporate and things like that, I kind of remind everyone that I'm like, you know, you don't see it, but like this thing, I promise you, is not gonna make or break, Spiffy. We're going to find a successful path forward, and generally puts a lot of people at ease because, the advantage I've had of working for you and working under you, even now is that, like, I know your expectations. They're relatively straightforward and clear, and
Yeah.
I think that's also a testament to the organization. Like, we understand what the mission is, but we also get the flexibility to try to figure out how we can do that without being micromanaged. You
Yeah.
said it, your lead how you want to lead, and like I get that opportunity. I get to lead my employees how
Yeah.
I would be led, and in doing so, we create this really successful machine, and we have some really incredible, bright people that work with us.
Yeah, it was interesting. So my last story with Addison. So like 2 days ago, so we have like every morning at six a.m. Eastern time, you get like I don't know, depending on who you are, you could get almost 15 emails, and they're reports. Our system, we have so much data coming out of the business. We generate all these reports, and we tend to have like two or three that are sort of like the opportunity of the day, right?
Mhm.
These are the things we're sort of focused on. And Addison's team came up on one of them, and Addison's team was, like, not shining, right? Like, they were, like, I forget what the story was, but, like, and I'm currently on the West Coast this week, and so, like, I wake up and, Addison's been at this for 2 hours, and I'm reading, and I read top to bottom, so I saw this note from Addison. It's like, "Hey," in the summary is this is not exactly, but it's like, "Hey, my team's jacked up. I'm all over it. If you want story, call me. Otherwise, I'm gonna focus on solving a problem." And he just sent, right? And I'm like,
Yep.
"What's he talking about?" So I read down and I'm like, "Oh, this is interesting." I can infer the story, like, because I've been around for 10 years and I sort of know how these things happen. But
Yep.
it's just like, you know, there was no fanfare. I didn't call Addison. I'm like, "Hey," I literally, like, responded with a double fist bump. "Got it. Call me if you need anything." And if you're a new technician, that's how you work with your with fleet account management. That's how you work with your GM. It's like, "Hey, look, there's 10 cars out here. I only expected 5. I got it." Or, "Hey, 911, there's some chaos out here. I need somebody to either come in and talk to the customer, or I need some more help," or whatever it might be. And so it's a culture where people just have a lot of respect for your abilities around that. And certainly, you've been around a really long time. it's interesting. I've not really thought about you as the corporate psychologist, but we may need to do more around that. It's pretty funny. We could write a small book about operations coaching based on all the stories you have seen and heard. It's interesting. I took a couple notes about that. I'm like, God, there's a lot of stories in there.
There are, and I think I was just joking with you yesterday. I think I just texted you yesterday too. I said, "One of these days, I'm gonna ask for honorary Spiffy or historian to be added
Yeah,
to, like, official job title."
yeah, for sure, for sure. That's
Yeah,
I mean,
there's a treasure trove of those, and I think we barely even scratched the surface today, and some are, warranted over, like, a beer, but not an
and
official city.
probably not publicly. Yeah, we shouldn't blast them out to the world, but we can laugh about them anyhow. Uh,
Absolutely.
all right. Hey, well, thank you for taking some time out of your day to talk to new folks about what it's like to be a career penguin here at Spiffy and the career paths we have. Appreciate your time as always, and thanks so much, man. We'll see you
Thank
guys. We'll see you guys out in the field. Bye.
Sounds good. Thanks, sir.